and you are back listening to the Good Morning Show on this Wednesday morning on Claremorris Community Radio 94.6 FM. And I'm joined live in the studio now with Niall and Kieran from Deadbeats, an Irish punk band. Welcome, guys.
How are you, Eleanor?
Good morning. How are you?
Good.
Good.
It's here.
So thank you so much for joining me in the studio, live in studio.
Yeah.
And you are members of the Deadbeats. Now, it's a punk band, and I'm sure no more than a lot of people, I'm sure you've come into contact having to always defend punk. But when people think
sometimes.
of punk music, they think of Sid Vicious and basically hooligans. But how would you define punk?
Well, we're not going for the Eurovision like Johnny Rotten, but I mean, yeah, what is punk? I suppose it's, I want to be anarchy. What does he mean? He's talking about community, really. So there's a strong element of volunteers, people volunteering to help each other out and mutual cooperation. And kind of that's what we're kind of doing down here. We've bands. Previously you came from Galway, you had Puck, Genuflection, Claggernack, and now on Saturday we'll have bands coming from Ballina, Yop and Urist, Mullingar, it's Count Tornado, and we'll have another band from Galway, Scream. So it's again, people, hey, would you like to do a gig? Yeah, let's do something together and put it on together. So there's that idea of, taking the power into the community and doing something that's for the community. Hence the last gig was for the Irish Red Cross and Ukraine Appeal and stuff like that. That we're always trying to give back and take ownership of our own lives and not kind of let it fall into dereliction like the streets around us,
Yes. Now, you're two local lads.
No, I'm actually from Castlebar.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, living up in Castlebar.
Nice. Yeah. And you came from Cross?
Claremorris, born and bred.
Nice. Yeah. So you're two local lads in this brilliant punk band. And it's great, as you mentioned with your last gig, that you're doing something for the Irish Red Cross Appeal. And you're helping to kind of teach people about punk music, I would say. That it's not...
Well, that was, I suppose, a background on that. Like, we can't take all the credit for that at all. Like, that's Hope Collective, Niall McGurk in Dublin. And he'd be kind of famous for bringing over Fugazi and Green Day before they became rock stars, I would say. And he's always had that DIY, create your own scene ethic. And a few months ago he asked me if I could put a gig on for a Canadian band that were touring, and I was like too shy to do it, or I didn't think it would work. And then I suppose twisted the arm and says, right, Niall, here's another one. This is for charity. And it's that book, Punk's Listen, which had about nearly 300 people from all across the world, like the likes of Henry Rollins, who people wouldn't necessarily know from Black Flag as the lead singer of a very famous hardcore punk band, would probably know him from, what's that, USA Miami or something, his acting roles and things like that. But so it's doing that, and we kind of set up an offshoot of the Deadbeats, which is Curseland Promotions. We chatted to the manager down in the Dalton, and of course, Andrew, great guy, he was positive about it and what the whole aims of it, was for. So we had about 100 people, a bit over 100 people the last time.
Amazing.
Venue holds about 300, so we've a bit to go to fill it, but we're hoping it'll keep growing and the people will realise this is live music, real music, that's written by the artists, performed for the people, and everything is going to be going back towards something, valid.
And I have to ask, how did the both of you get involved in punk music?
I know, I kind of got into it through the drums.
Oh, nice, okay.
So that's how I kind of started off, just seeing punk drummers, like the speed that they can go, and it just opened up a whole new door for me. I just started listening to everything, and I got more and more into music. So
well, for me, I'd have to go back a few decades, I suppose. But growing up here in Claremorris, and I suppose at the time a lot of metal was popular, but I just could never relate to the lyrics of that. Whereas punk rock, you're talking about social issues, and you're talking about, I was like, all right, well, these guys are talking about what I'm seeing in the world. So I got into it through that, we'll say, and it's always been part of my life in the background. And I suppose the Deadbeats came about because the story of that, you can go back to 93 and I walk into Sally Long's in Galway, and there's a lad there, and I can see that he has pole-spiked hair and a leather jacket, but he's hiding it all. And I'm kind of going, what a conformist. And of course what's really bothering me is there's about 19-year-old girls giving him their full attention, I'm a young lad myself. Turns around, he says, that's your guitar, I just bought a guitar, a 6-string. I says, it is. How do you play? What band's he into? He says, GBH, Exploited, a band called Coitus from London. He says, I play in them. And I says, no way you don't. No. I punctuated with some expletives, but he tells me, no, I do. And he mentioned that he was the guitarist, Pat Duffy, and the skinny Paul Kelly was from Dublin. And Alien wasn't even from London, he was from outside of it. So I was like, how does he know all of this? And then, of course, he asked me if he could join a band. I was in a band at the time, AOH. we were terrible, and he asked, can he join the band? So I said, absolutely. So we did a bit of rehearsal. Now, he tragically died shortly afterwards, but it was punk about just before the pandemic. Coitus were playing a gig in memorial for their bassist, and I just contacted him and says, hey, you know, it's 25 years since Pat died, and went up to the gig and met a whole lot of people I hadn't seen in an awful long time, and, you know, got reinfected with, I have to do something. And it was the pandemic, so got a back line together and a band together, and that's where the Deadbeats are.
That's incredible. It's incredible because, as you said, you're very much for the people and giving back, and when there's important causes, you're doing something about it. And do you write your own music? And
we do, yeah. We have about 15 of our own songs and about 10 in the works now, because at first, before Kieran and John joined the band, it was me, I was the principal songwriter. And I'm always kind of the opinion that you can always do better with more brains in the mix, you know.
Right.
And these guys came along and it's transformed the stuff completely, which is great. But yeah, I suppose just try and write about topics that are either personal or relevant to everyone, or maybe sometimes geopolitical, and put forth an opinion. It seems to work. We're getting people to sing back our lyrics. Can't mention the exact lyrics they sing back on radio, but you know, we seem to connect and they seem to get the attitude and the feeling of it, and we seem to capture that. So it's
I think people really appreciate real lyrics, don't they? Lyrics certainly that they can relate to.
Well, there's a guy, Penny Rambo in Crass, who's their drummer, and he would always kind of a philosopher as well. He kind of always talk about that your intent has to be real. You can't be going into music thinking I want to be a rock star and have a, you know, mansion and 19 sports cars. It has to be led by the arts, and I would agree with that. And I think that's what punk does, because none of us are trying to, you know, we're not going to get, a lot of our songs won't get radio play. It's just, you know.
Which is reality,
and, you know, it's,
unfortunately.
we're kind of a bunch of individuals, you have the likes of, you have so many promoters in this country. That's one of the things I see, from Belfast, Dublin, Cork, Limerick, Galway, Sligo, Ballina, ourselves. Athlone, you know, and so many people are actually putting on gigs and stuff like that. It's a really good community. It's really working. I would hope, part of the mission of the Curse Land is to gather the tribes and get us working in a more effective way, you know, so we can offer Irish punk bands. I put up a thing on Facebook and I was asking how many bands are active, and I was thinking there might be 15 or so, including the likes of Stiff Little Fingers. That turned out there was about 60 bands. There's about 60 punk bands in Ireland, population of 4.5 million. At the current moment, all gigging, all playing. And you don't get much, but you know, they're filling places, people are listening to them.
Yes.
So again, it's, talk about underground, you know, even within the underground I didn't realise it was that.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's,
impressive
would I be right in saying that punk was underground? Originally underground?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, you know, people say, well, when was it invented? Was it the Ramones and CBGB in New York, or was it the Sex Pistols and, you know, the 100 Club Roxy in London? I'd be of the opinion that what defines punk, and, you know, I'd be hated for this, is the attitude, is the, you know, the anarchism. So, Anarchy in the UK and the Sex Pistols, you know, some people say they're a boy band. I don't think so, but I mean, I think that's the defining moment of where it goes from garage rock into punk rock at that stage. And then, of course, you have the second generation, the anarcho-punks like Crass, who took it really literally and wanted to set up an alternative society rather than, you know, so it'd be totally outside of it. And then you have UK 82, which is a bit more like one of the, UK 82, the style is named after an Exploited song. We opened up for them there last September in the Grand Social. And so Waddy Butch and all that, you know, these guys lived their life. They got a lot of grief for a while. Because they weren't anarcho-punk, right? But they were unashamedly, listen, I want to put bread on the table by playing some tunes.
Right.
And what's wrong with that?
Exactly.
You know, there is, of course, the punk police who think that their heroes have to be impoverished in order for them to borrow their, you know, realism or whatever.
Right.
But
yeah, but you're...
I wouldn't be as idealistic as that.
No. It's as you mentioned, it's about being real and be able to connect to the people.
Yeah. Being relevant in that sense. And, you know, doing whatever you can. I mean, people say, well, how would you have a punk band at Claremorris? You're like, what's the punk scene? Well, it's probably, you know, sitting beside you here in the studio. But we're connecting to people who've never heard of us before. We've done it in Sally's in Galway and stuff like that, where people are not familiar at all with punk rock, and then suddenly they're jumping around having a great time and stuff like that. And you're saying something that they can relate to, which is important, I think, you know.
And changing people's perception as well.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't want to be like, you know, some high priest or anything like that, but I mean, no, you're just making people think. It's to ask the question and let them come to their own conclusions, and then let them see the value in, well, what am I going to do on a Saturday night? I'm in Claremorris, and here we go. There's 5 bands playing down there. You know,
Yeah, take a listen. Let's see
why
what's
not?
happening.
You know, and hopefully it might inspire a few other young people who are living in Claremorris to go, hey, this is something we can actually do. I know when I was 15 growing up here, if there was something like this, I'd be like, wow, this is something I can reach. It's not, there is no security fences, and you need your binoculars to see a band on a huge stage. This is right up close, and you know, they're having pints with you afterwards, you know, that kind of way. So
yeah. Well, how about we give people a little taste of your music?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is my personal favourite of yours. This is Love Is Dead. And the video stars Sid Vicious, right?
It does, yeah, that is correct, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll give them this a taste. This is the Deadbeats and Love Is Dead. Hope you enjoy.
Love is dead. Don't you know? Through my bed, poison blow. Whoa! Bobby's dead. Memory blows. Plays the band. Dark of love. Whoa! He's dead. Watch him go. Remembering eyes. Sweet and slow. Oh. Bobby's dead. Don't you know? Through my bed, poison blow. Whoa!
The Deadbeats, Love Is Dead, and I'm joined live in studio with Niall and Kieran from The Deadbeats. Brilliant song, my personal favourite, as I said.
Thank you
I
very
really
much.
enjoyed it. And as I mentioned as well, the video starred Sid Vicious, which I think, as we mentioned before, a lot of people will associate Sid Vicious and the Sex Pistols with punk rock, but in a negative light. And certainly with Sid Vicious and the way he lived and
yeah,
his
there's
death
two
and all
factions,
that.
I suppose. There always was. There was a hedonistic faction, which kind of, to me, it came from New York and the Ramones and stuff, and there's a similar kind of, you know, depressing story with a lot of those people, tragic story.
Yeah.
And then there was the kind of more, you know, Johnny Rotten and I Want to Be Anarchy, and then Crass going into that, and, you know, bands like that are trying to actually do something positive, and a lot of the community-based, you know, let's do gigs and let's try and do benefits. But even the Pistols did that. Like, their last gig in the UK was for firemen. They were out on strikes. They did a benefit for them in Wales, and they put on a matinee on Christmas Day for their kids, and then they played again later in the evening. Some of those kids, like 40 years later, are going, yeah, punk rock, man, means so much to me because of that. So, like, you had the likes of Sid Vicious there, but you know, if you look at the old footage of that, he's there playing around with kids and having a bit of crack like with them and all that, and making it about them, you know. Which was so even there, you know. It's not the commonly held view of, you know, it's not the sensationalism that usually accompanies like a story.
It has very negative connotations, almost as if you're promoting violence and drug use and all the rest of it.
Yeah, but I suppose the story is he was called Sid Vicious because it was named after a hamster, Johnny Rotten, who bit him, and then he called this hamster's name was Sid, so Vicious, so it became, and he was the most unlikely character, they assumed, because he was they thought he was a funny guy. Now he became a bit more melancholy when the heroin addiction crept in, but if you ask anyone who knew him at the time, he seems to have been the life of the party and quite.
Right.
And then, of course, as he joined the Pistols, it might have been the worst thing for him. He tried to play to the reputation that was, you know.
And the lip curl and the.
Yeah. I mean, he was
slogan,
a star. Like, there's no doubt about it. But I suppose that's what Love Is Dead is about. Like, it's about heroin addiction in a way, and the way you'd look at, well, what's heroin? Well, it's, you know, diacetylmorphine, hydrochloride, so you're talking about an opiate. And if you're talking, why does that work with people? And you're like, it works because we have endorphin. What's endorphin? Well, it's the post-orgasmic release, so it's euphoria. So you'll have people who, his mother was, he had a pretty atrocious upbringing, so you have people who've never found love, and they find an artificial synthetic version of it, and they self-medicate, and that's kind of what heroin addiction is. When I'm saying love is dead, don't you know? Yeah, I'm just trying to say that's what the reason, that's why people are doing it. Through my veins the poison flows. The second verse I'm saying, what do I say? Escape the past and memory flow. You know, it's about that, and basically to find a darker low is like, well, your solution is going to be self-destructive and even worse in the end. And that's kind of what that song is about, really.
Yeah.
So, I'm playing a bit of the sensationalism by putting up Sid Vicious and all that, but the question then is, the question I'm asking is, well, you know, the guy is dead, and, you know.
Yeah, he was only 21.
I would never judge people for an addiction or anything like that. I would never do that. Like, I would see that, okay, you know, there's reasons there.
Do you think that's the problem? It's the judgmental?
Well, it doesn't help if somebody is ostracised from society or criminalised, even worse, and then they come out and they can't straighten themselves out, or they can, it'll be the best they can hope for is a life of precarious poverty. You know, it's not a great incentive to, because it's some journey to pick yourself up from that position into a position where I would feel for that. Hence the lyrics are kept simple, you know.
But we mentioned Johnny Rotten, who's still going, and as you mentioned, is in the Eurovision.
Yeah, I think it's a bit failed, but yeah.
But I mean, fair play to him, because the guy had a lot of courage in that in the 1970s he was one of the first stars to speak out against Jimmy Savile.
He was, and he got barred from the BBC.
Exactly. As a result, got banned, and then years and years later appeared on Piers Morgan, you know, when they played that clip.
Yeah.
And he turns to the audience and he goes, "Wasn't I right?" and got a big cheer.
Yeah. But he was a contrary guy.
Right.
Did you know why he was?
No.
Because his father's from Tuam. Did you know that?
No way. I knew he had.
And you know they're all contrary down there in Tuam. Throw away.
But speaking of Johnny Rotten, I need to ask you about Count Tornado guitarist Duncan.
Yeah, he's from Ballantyne. He's living there, so he's originally from England, and he's a guy, really interesting character. If anyone's at the gig, they should give him a chat. He's actually been to a few of the original.
Yeah, I was just going to say he went to the 1977 Sex Pistols gig at the 100 Club.
That's right, yeah.
And he spoke to you about it, right?
Yeah. We were chatting about it. He's a really interesting guy, like, real genuine guy as well. But living in Ballantyne, which, you know, there you go. Like, well, you've got a punk rock band at Claremorris, another guy, guitarist in Ballantyne, and as I said, Johnny Rotten's dad came from Tuam, and the local people probably haven't
No.
an inkling about that,
No,
how
not
connected
at all.
they are to all of that. And of course, in all of those lyrics, that what we experience here in rural Ireland, you know, our greatest export is our children, as we say in one of our songs.
Yeah.
That kind of pathos, that kind of tragedy, it leaks into, and we're looking for something better and looking for a community too. Because I remember, I think it was a guy from the Galway Chamber of Commerce once says to me, draw a line from Galway to Dundalk, and everything north of it has been forgotten about by the state. You know, and there is that kind of, and we expect, like, I remember growing up in school here in Claremorris, and maybe a priest would walk in, what do you want to do when you grow up? And you can imagine in a school in Dublin, people would say, you know, whatever, astronaut, doctor, or whatever. Everyone in the school was like, I'm going to go to America, I'm going to London, I'm going to Boston, I'm going to whatever. Like, for that to be the aim and ambition of a 6 or 7 year old child, I think is, you know, it's a real indictment, and we can't look for other people to sort it out, you know, so we have to do it ourselves. So in a way, that's what I'm doing it in a musical way, saying, well, if it can be done this way, maybe it can be done other ways. Maybe we can have community-owned credit unions and local currencies with negative interest rates, and, you know, people aren't getting their mortgages, and they're not paying an extra 700,000 to a bank. Every couple has that going into the real economy. You know, there's an intelligence about that rather than the simplicity of, I want to be an anarchist. You know what I mean?
Yes,
There's
a lot of thought that goes behind
that all comes across. Yeah, well, it's not just me. Like, I mean, I only picked it up from these guys. I suppose that's the revolution of punk rock that it made you think. So that's why I was saying previously, to me, it's like anarchy in the UK is the start of punk, because it makes people think about that. Whether they were genuine, I think they were, like, because they were around Vivian Westwood and they were around Malcolm McLaren, and they were into the Paris 68 and what happened there. So they were, you know, it was situationalist and all that. So that's all fundamental to the punk rock thing, I suppose, you know.
You mentioned Vivian Westwood there, who I was just about to mention, who passed away recently.
That's right.
But, you know, even she was made fun of for her fashion.
Yeah.
And her fashion collections. There's a very famous clip from, I believe, 1976, I want to say, where she was interviewed on the BBC. And she just introduced her collection that was called Something About the Future. And the audience were laughing at her, and the presenter asked her, do you really believe that this is going to be around years and years later? And sure enough it was, and today everyone is wearing Vivian Westwood. But she wasn't afraid to go against the grain, and she had her punk shop in London.
That's right, yeah.
And was very vital to the punk scene and to the fashion.
Well, that's where they congregated, yeah, you know, absolutely. Like, you know, Johnny Rotten might say, you know, she ripped him off, or, you know, there's always, but he doesn't give a lot of credit to a lot of people. Like Steve Jones is an absolute genius on guitar, but I mean, yeah, I'd say, like, look what she did, and she brought it to the forefront, and she was sensationalist. And that's the situationalism, that's the Paris 68, that's the idea of shocking people out of conformity to get them to think. So you create a situation to overcome the spectacle of conformity, you know. So there's, you know, they were employing the tactics which was about social change for the benefit of people. And a lot of people missed that because they were just upset that it was dragging their core beliefs and there's a bit of cognitive dissonance into question, you know. But I mean, but really it was, you know, it was a positive motivation behind all of these things, you know. And it does liberate people. Like, you have football players now who have Mohicans and stuff like that, which, you know, we can laugh about it, but yeah, I mean, we're a long way from 1977. You know?
We are, very much so. Would you say it takes a lot of courage to be a punk?
I don't know. There's no option. It's not a case of bravery or courage. It's like, you know, you got to look. You know, I have a few kids. Like, you kind of go, what's the future for them? Do you keep playing the game? And you know, I have an uncle who has 3 kids and they're in Melbourne, and he, you know, rarely sees them. And, you know, something has to be done. And maybe, like, I'm not going to, you know, it's taken us 2,000 years to get to this point since capitalism really kicked off and our laws based on Roman laws. But, you know, so it's not going to overnight. I don't believe in any kind of 1917. We saw what happened, you know. But I think if everybody kind of does as much as they can, and you're enticing people by showing them the positive benefit of that, it's the game of Monopoly. You know, you go to a party and there's someone really boring person says, I want to play a game of Monopoly. And everybody plays it, and after 3 rounds, everywhere you move, you're on some rent seeker is taking everything you have, and you're afraid to move. So somebody politely excuses themselves to have a drink in the kitchen, and eventually the whole party moves to the kitchen, where people are forming a community and are sharing stories and hopes and dreams. And you have these 3 sad old guys on the Monopoly board still the whole night, missing out on all that, chasing after, you know, an abstraction.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, when you see that, you can't unsee it.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
It's not courage, it's just awareness, you know.
Yeah, and what we've been conditioned to believe and to chase, you know.
So it's not about, you know, reacting against or in any way a negative. It's about trying to build something that's more positive and sustainable, you know.
Do you think the pandemic changed people's ideas of chasing money and possessions?
Yeah, I think people, you know, because everybody, you know, you call it the term wage slave. Like, there's a lot of, you know, mortgages and car loans and stuff like that. People are, indentured servants. That's a horrible thing to even face or think about. But, suddenly they had time. Suddenly they became time millionaires as opposed to the ideas of being a financial one. And they realized that was more valuable, that I'm here, I'm able to communicate with my children and interact with them, or my partner and stuff like that. And yeah, it's a bit isolating at first, but then as people could move around, why do people now want to work from home? Why does it change, effectively? Like, I'm afraid that they'll try and claw it back, we'll say, and you think of the pointlessness. Like, we know the science, people work for 5 hours a day maximum, at optimal level. After that, it's a serious law of diminishing returns, and yet there's people who will go, if I get them to work an extra half an hour a day, that's the 20 days holidays covered. There's people with that Victorian, and of course we're living in a neoliberal world. Liberal is the laissez-faire Victorian capitalist idea. So yeah, there's hopes and fears. Hopefully people won't let it be clawed back and will keep progressing and try and have some fun in their lives.
Yeah.
People have forgotten about that.
Yeah. And it's great to hear you speak because, as I say, punk is associated with negative connotations of thugs and, deadbeats.
Yeah, well, that's the name. That's what the name is about. It's to challenge that perception. That's what that video of putting Sid Vicious on it and all of his, snarling expressions is to challenge people's perception. Well, that's what I'm presenting. That's what you see. Now, look a bit closer. Look a bit more closely. Look through the pane of glass and see what's actually inside.
And actually listen to the words.
Yeah, hopefully,
Yeah, listen to what you're saying.
And if not, then just have a good time. Enjoy yourself and kind of go, wow, I don't know why I'm jumping around here, but I'm having a good time. And, hey, they're not so bad after all.
Yeah. Well, will we give them another taste of your music?
Yeah, cheers.
We'll play another song. This is the Deadbeats, and this is Ode to an Egypt, with a picture of you with red and green hair, right?
That's right,
is that you in
Mayo.
there?
That's it,
Proud of your roots. This is Ode to an Egypt, and this is live from one of your gigs from last year, May 2022.
All right, yeah. I've
You're
done
trying
a few.
to
I'm just trying to
remember
remember which one, yeah. But,
Here's Ode to an Egypt by the Deadbeats.
What am I supposed to do with you now? When you have your God you, coming through another day with you now. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? Another pain, another day.
The Deadbeats and Ode to an Egypt, and that was live from May 2022. The guitar work on that is fabulous.
Thank you.
Really, really good. And
I don't know why. It's me playing guitar. I
Yeah.
would be a low intermediate guitarist at best, I would say. But
No, that was really good. And your music is very catchy as well. I'm sure people, when they hear punk, they think of screaming and...
well, the punk is a diverse style. Like you'll have old school stuff, the Clash and all that, and you'll have up to extreme noise terror. You'll have, it's. I would say, like, I often thought this. I'd say, like, if you take all the genres of music and you imagine that punk is just one, there's probably more variety in punk than there is in all the rest of the genres of music together. And and you wonder why, and then you're like, well, yeah, because you're encouraging people to just do what's inside them and be authentic. So of course it's going to be different, like,
Yeah.
But, so like this next gig, like Screeve is a grindcore band, so that's going to be fairly intense. And then you've kind of got Urist, who's one guy, and he's got his music written behind him, and it's kind of rap punk, And you've got Yop, two lads from Ballina will be playing, and again, they have their own thing, and again, it had to work in that way. And then you've got Tornado, who's kind of very flamboyant, kind of rock and roll bluesy kind of driven punk. And then you ourselves, I suppose, we're a mix of old school stuff, like maybe that last song, and like more harder stuff, like Gathering in the Shadows, I suppose, would be kind of like a mix or something. But so yeah, you have all of that, I suppose, in it. So.
And speaking of gigs, what can people expect at your gigs? Like the kind of music, the kind of people?
Ambulances and riots and police.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, I know. No, it's people who love music come down, and as I said, the great thing about punk rock, I remember years ago taking a bus from this town to go, there was a bus hired by all the lads who were into metal to go to Metallica, and I jumped on it to go and see Chaos UK, who were playing in Barnstormers at the time in Dublin. So I jump off at the Halfpenny Bridge and I go to that gig, and when Chaos UK came on, I was at the front of it, and I fell over the stage monitors, which gives you an idea of what size the stage was, because it was such a people were so enthusiastic. It wasn't just like mental. People were just so enthusiastic. It was a push. I fell over that. Two or three guys fell on top of me. The lead singer was underneath me. I fell on top of him. He gets out and he pulls me out and he goes, "You all right?" Like, and there's always that compassion and concern. Like, nobody ever gets injured at a punk rock gig, And even though it's intense music, but he goes, "You all right?" And I was wearing some Give Them Enough Rope Clash T-shirt. And he says, and I jump back in and he goes, "This one's for him," and plays White Riot by The Clash, right? And that's my first kind of punk gig as a teenager. And I'm like, I've gone to Dublin, chatting to the lead singer, he's playing a song, and we're having this kind of,
experience.
This kind of connection, like, it's there. And then I'm thinking, my friends are up in the Point Depot at the time, they're probably having to use binoculars to see the band, and you're like, that's the difference. So what do you expect at a punk rock gig? You can expect people to walk up onto the stage, walk back down, share a pint with you, that kind of stuff, chat about stuff, and be real about the issues and stuff like that. But everybody is, looking out for each other. There's a real, it's not hippie now, like, it's not, don't get me wrong, like, it's intense, but it's, it's a community, we take it seriously. This is people who are coming to see the music, this is, people who are trying to engage maybe a bit of activism, and, whether it's to do charity work or something like that. So this is, it's important, but it's important to have fun.
Yes, absolutely. And speaking of gigs, you have a few gigs upcoming. You have one this Saturday at the Dalton Inn at 8 p.m. Can I ask about the festival in August?
Yeah, we've applied. Let's see if we get it. We applied for Rebellion in Blackpool, and they were supposed to get back to us in the next couple of weeks.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed,
And that is, for those of you who don't know, that is the biggest punk rock festival in the world.
It is, yeah. There was about 15,000 people at it last year. And there's another kind of inspiration. If you look at Blackpool Chamber of Commerce and their website, and you would think, right, punk rock Chamber of Commerce? And they're all so excited about the punks coming because you have 15,000 people in town for the weekend for 4 or 5 days, and all of the economic, real economy activity, Airbnbs, B&Bs, hotels, food, restaurants, all that. It's all, has a positive impact on the community, whether they're into punk rock or not. They're loving to see the colourfulness of it. And there's a bit of me kind of going, okay, let's try and do something like that here. Reach for the stars, you might hit the moon. Reach for the moon, you don't leave the earth, that kind of thing.
So you're fairly busy then this year, would you say?
We are, yeah. We're playing in Ballina as well, and I think it's the 7th of April or something like that, Good Friday. And we have a few gigs coming up that dates have to be firmed up and stuff like that. And trying to get into a studio and do an album as well. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
But,
and I didn't know this, but there's Ballina Punks spelled with an X that exists, and Galway's West Coast Punks also spelled with an X.
Yeah. So they're all kind of cooperative communities. So you have several bands or people, and they all come together and arrange, the gigs, arrange the benefits, or, do some charity work, all that kind of stuff, and rehearsal spaces. So, they're working together, and that's the story everywhere. Like, I suppose, like, it's finally bled down. Like, you first had it in the cities, where you had, as I said, the Hope Collective doing their kind of stuff. You had, Peter Jones, and he did Dando Promotions, and think of Eddie Nielsen, he's putting on as a buddy corps or something. You have so many people who are doing this and are trying to. That's a lot of their time they're given and stuff like that and there's no financial reward in it really.
No, they're doing it for because
it's like the game, like I said, the game of Monopoly. Do you want to play that, or do you want to go out in the kitchen and have some real human experience?
Yeah.
So that kind of way.
And the last gig you did in the Dalton was it was to raise awareness for the Irish Red Cross Ukrainian appeal, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
Like you got out there and did something.
Well, that's because there was a book written, Punks Listen, and
by Hope Collective.
by the Hope Collective, so Niall McGurk and his co-conspirator, and basically you had nearly 300 musicians. Like the guy from the Waterboys, the lead singer, he contributed, and you had, as I said, Henry Rollins. You have some serious people who've contributed to that, and again, there you have it. There you have the idea that a community, people will. You'd be surprised what people will do, what they'll volunteer for, when they know it's not to enrich just one person, when it's not a selfish motive, when it's a community-based motive, And that's what punk teaches you in a way, But so why not?
Well, this is brilliant. So we have I suppose the punk scene was always there, but it wasn't in the forefront, in the mainstream.
Yeah, I suppose, if you're wondering why, I suppose, there was a lot of violence at the early gigs, but you had the likes of, you're talking about, people talking about anarchism, and, if you're talking about cooperation and there was, there's no tolerance for racism or sexism or any of those things. And then you had the likes of the National Front in England, who were very much the opposite, and they would come to the gigs to create riots and stuff. Right. So a lot of the violence that happened to the gigs were not by the punks, but the people coming in trying to stamp it out, and then of course the reputation goes with the punk gigs. So that did happen early on. That hasn't happened since the 80s, and I suppose. So when there was a reputation.
When people come to your gigs, they don't have to expect any danger. That it's literally, as you said, enjoy.
I know. I'm smiling because because I'm in that scene. It's so obvious.
Yeah.
But it would say we play gigs and there'll be people there who are 18. There are people there who are 60. There's men and women. There's as many men and women jumping around to our stuff, which I quite like because I didn't want to be doing a boys kind of parade.
Just standing there.
So it's good to see that that I suppose we as the Deadbeats connect to people of all genders and all ages, and they find something to connect with, they find something relevant, and I think that's what punk does, and so you can be going down, chatting to the likes of Duncan asking about the early Sex Pistols gigs, or you can be meeting 18-year-old kids who've just trying to get it together, and the whole thing is an absolute novelty to them, and everybody's, but then there's that helpfulness, the people are trying to build each other up. I think that's a big thing about it,
Well, it sounds like a real inclusive community. And as I say, you have a brand new gig at the Dalton Inn, February the 11th, this Saturday at 8 p.m. And would I be right in saying that all is welcome?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. It's called Love is Dead, of course, again, it's the song, but it's also, it's coming up to Valentine's, so just, the Asian provocateur, Think about it, lads.
And finally, where can people find out more about you? How can they get in contact with you? And, if you have upcoming gigs and music and all the rest of it.
Well, I suppose we're on Facebook. If you put on Deadbeats MO, you'll find us. And we'll have a YouTube channel, same thing with Deadbeats. And, a lot of our material is up there. And or go through Cursed Land, or, go through anyone, in the punk scene. We all know each other. That's the great thing, and future gigs I'll be bringing people down from other parts of Ireland and also from abroad and stuff to play here, so Well, I'd like to have seen at 15 when I was growing up, you know.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much, both of you, Niall and Kieran, for coming in today
Thank
live
you.
in the studio. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, and it's great to talk about something different and also to promote something that includes inclusivity, and that is a real community. And I hope with this interview people will change their perception of punk music and punk artists.
Or if nothing else, if they're inspired enough to whatever they're interested in themselves in life, to give it a go, to instead of feeling like somebody else has to do it for you. No, actually, I just have to ring up my pals and get something going, and, you know, you never know what might happen in any of the arts or anything, you know.
Amazing.
But,
Yeah.
anyway.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much again. And I'm going to end now with one of your songs. It's called Breathe
Thank you.
by the Deadbeats.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Now stop!